How did they survive the winter that almost ended your species? You are standing on cracked earth under a sun that has stopped giving heat. The sky is the color of old bone. The trees you knew are bare, and the river that fed your family has shrunk to a chain of still, shallow pools. Somewhere in the distance, a volcano you have never seen has already decided your fate. You do not know it yet, but you are living through the closest your kind has ever come to vanishing completely. For 99% of your history, your ancestors were not the masters of this planet. They were a small, fragile, easily broken thread of life. And at least once, that thread was pulled so thin that nearly everyone who could have been your ancestor was already gone. Picture it. Out of every person who could have carried your bloodline forward, imagine that 98 of them simply never lived to have children. That is not a metaphor. That is roughly what the genetics suggest happened. How does a species almost end? And how, against everything, does it not? To understand the winter that nearly erased you, start with the genes you are carrying right now. Inside almost every cell in your body is a record, not a written one, a statistical one. Your DNA is a copy of a copy of a copy, stretching back through hundreds of thousands of years of parents and children. And here is the strange part. When a population shrinks to almost nothing, it leaves a scar in that record. A small group of survivors can only pass on a small slice of the diversity that once existed. Everything that the people who died were carrying, every variation in their genes, simply disappears with them. So even tens of thousands of years later, the descendants look oddly similar to one another. Too similar, as if they all came from a tiny handful of people. Geneticists call this a bottleneck. The name is exact. A wide world of human variety, forced through a narrow neck, and only a few drops making it out the other side. In 2023, a team of scientists published a study in the journal Science that read this scar more clearly than anyone had before. Led by researchers including Wang Jihu, Ye-Hsuan Pan, and the theoretical population geneticist Yunzhen Fu, they built a new mathematical tool with a heavy name, the fast infinitesimal time coalescent process. You can forget the name. What it does is simple to picture. It takes the genomes of living people and runs the family tree backward, watching the branches merge into older and older shared ancestors, and uses the pattern of those merges to estimate how many people were alive at different moments deep in the past. They analyzed the genomes of more than 3,000 people from populations across Africa and around the world. And the number that came back was almost frightening in how small it was. Around 900,000 years ago, the breeding population of your ancestors may have collapsed to roughly 1,280 individuals. Not 1,280 in a village, 1,280 in the entire world. Let that number sit with you. Today, there are more than 8 billion of us. Back then, the whole future of humanity could have fit inside a single modern concert hall with seats to spare. How long do you think that lasted? A bad year? A bad decade? The study suggests this near-extinction stretched on for about 117,000 years. For more than 100 millennia, your ancestors lived on the very edge of disappearing. The anthropologist Giorgio Manzi, one of the senior authors, pointed out that this gap in our numbers lines up neatly with a real, puzzling hole in the fossil record from that exact period, when ancient human remains become strangely scarce. The bones go quiet because there was almost no one left to leave them. So who were these survivors? Here you have to let go of the picture you might be carrying. They were not you, not yet. This was long before your species, Homo sapiens, existed at all. These were earlier human ancestors, walking upright, using stone tools, almost certainly using fire. Some scientists think this very bottleneck may have been a forge. When a population is squeezed that hard, the pressures of survival become brutal and absolute. The traits that did not help you live simply died out with the people who carried them. And one haunting possibility raised by the researchers is that this crushing period may have pushed the changes that eventually led to bigger brains, and to the branching that produced Neanderthals, Denisovans, and ultimately you. But this is only one near ending. Your story has more than one winter. Now move forward in time, almost all the way to the present, to roughly 74,000 years ago. By now, your direct species does exist. Anatomically modern humans are alive in Africa, and on the island of Sumatra, in what is now Indonesia, a mountain named Toba does something almost beyond imagining. It does not just erupt, it detonates. The Toba super-eruption was the largest volcanic event in millions of years, ejecting hundreds of cubic kilometers of rock and ash, an explosion thousands of times more powerful than the blast that tore apart Mount St. Helens. Ash from Toba has been found buried in the seafloor of the Indian Ocean and across the Bay of Bengal, thousands of kilometers away. In 1998, the anthropologist Stanley Ambrose of the University of Illinois proposed something chilling about that eruption. He argued that Toba had flung so much sulfur and ash into the high atmosphere that it dimmed the sun itself. The result, he suggested, was a volcanic winter, global temperatures falling several degrees, summers that failed, plants withering. And in that long gray cold, he proposed, the human population was squeezed once again, down perhaps to only a few thousand survivors clinging to warmer refuges in tropical Africa. For years, this was the dramatic story, the mountain that almost ended us. It is a powerful image, but here is where your history takes a turn that very few people expect. Because the more carefully scientists looked, the more the simple version of that story began to fall apart. When researchers examined archaeological sites in India that sit directly above and below the Toba ash layer, they found something that should not be there if the world had ended. They found continuity. Stone tools before the eruption, and stone tools after it, made by people who apparently kept on living. Closer still to the volcano, the record showed no great collapse, and studies of the climate found that the cooling, while real, may not have been the planet freezing catastrophe first imagined. Some of the most detailed climate models suggested the southern hemisphere barely cooled at all. Then came one of the most revealing discoveries of all. At a site in Ethiopia called Shinfamidama 1, a team led by the anthropologist John Capelman found evidence of humans living right through the time of the Toba eruption, identified by tiny glass shards from the volcano itself settled into the ground. And these people did not vanish. They adapted. As the eruption stretched the dry season longer and longer, the rivers stopped flowing and broke into isolated, shrinking water holes. And in those water holes, fish became trapped, easy to catch. The evidence shows these humans shifted their diet, leaning on the fish concentrated in those drying pools. As Capelman put it, it was almost like fish in a barrel. Faced with a world turning against them, they did not simply die. They changed how they lived, and they survived the very disaster that was supposed to end them. Do you see the twist now? For years, the winter of Toba was told as the night humanity nearly died. But the deeper evidence tells a stranger, prouder story. The eruption was real. The hardship was real. But your ancestors were not passive victims waiting for the cold to take them. They were adaptable, clever, stubborn. They followed the fish. They moved. They endured. So which winter truly almost ended you? The honest answer is that the most severe, best supported near-extinction in our records is not the famous volcano at all. It is that earlier, quieter catastrophe 900,000 years ago, written in your genes, when your ancestors dwindled to barely more than 1,000 and held on, somehow, for over 100,000 years before their numbers ever recovered. And that is the part worth carrying with you. Every one of those survivors was, in a sense, a thread that refused to break. You are not descended from the ones who gave up, because the ones who gave up left no one behind. Every single person you have ever met, every face in every crowd, crowd, every name in every history book, came through that same impossibly narrow neck. The whole of humanity is the family of a few thousand who would not stop. Think about that the next time your own life feels too cold, too dark, too narrow to survive. It is written into you at the level of your cells that your line has been here before, pushed to almost nothing, reduced to a handful under a dead gray sky, and still here you are. You are standing on cracked earth under a sun that has stopped giving heat, but you are standing. Your ancestors made sure of it, and the winter that almost ended your species became, instead, the proof of how hard your kind is to